We are going
We're-
to, we might swear in, Karen is be swearing our new members in.
Well, we can look at the minutes first.
Okay.
So, first of all, we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Thank you very much. Carrie and then Brandon. Any discussion about the minutes? All right, well, all in favor say aye of approving the minutes.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right, so those are approved. I'll sign them after the meeting. All right, so we also now, is Karen still out here?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay,
There.
hey Karen, we need to swear in a new member of the board.
Are you ready?
Yes, please.
There's actually 3 of them.
Oh, all right.
Carrie has,
Carrie,
yeah, has
Wallace,
already
Chris Gifford, okay, and Brandon Huckabee.
Yes.
In theory, Ben should be sworn in too. We need him the paperwork too.
Who?
Ben
Ben.
Tackett. He's one of our alternates. That one's on me.
Okay, everybody will raise your right hand. I state your name.
Chris Gifford.
Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of Board of Adjustment, Commissioners, place, state your places. You know,
Place 2.
alternate. I have Carrie Wallace, place 1, Chris Gifford, place 2, Brandon Huckabee, place 5,
5.
and then alternate. For the city of Stephenville and state of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
I do.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Sonny, to get paperwork for
Mr. Tackett.
Sign.
if you'll sign this one and that one.
Okay.
Sign
Yeah.
that one and then this one, okay. Oh, okay, I'll make that sign. Bottom one's yours. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's open up the public hearing. We have two cases that we need to address today. First is case number SE 2018-001. And so, Jeremy, do you want to?
Yeah,
Introduce
applicant Amber Broyles is requesting a special exception under section 1211 to allow a billboard to be constructed off premise at 112 Morgan Mill Road, Stephenville, Texas. As per our sign ordinance, the construction of new permanent off-premise signs shall be prohibited in any zoning district or the ETJ without a special exception. The existing non-conforming permanent off-sign signs in the city or ETJ that are adjacent to interstate highways and federal aid primary highways, as in those terms are defined in the Highway Beautification Act, are subject to the regulation. So basically with our special exception, they must still meet the TxDOT regulations. We did check with TxDOT. It is confirmed they did issue a permit, pending, our approval. They'll be able to construct those. And so this first location is off of Morgan Mill Road. If you know where Bargaintown is just north of that. The zoning in the area, it is commercial zoning. So there's a kind of a shot of where that sign's gonna be located. They did a good job putting together a packet for that. It's a location of the billboard, another from the other side of it. So I believe there is a representative for Lamar Signs, and they did approve him to speak on behalf of them.
Beforehand?
Yeah.
So the representative for Amber Broyles is here?
That's right.
All right. If you'd go to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tommy Roberts. I live in Abilene, Texas, and I am representing Lamar Outdoor Advertising. I'm not Amber Broyles, But I do appreciate members of the board meeting with us today and considering this application. Very appreciative of that and the dialogue about it that's been started. We have a couple of applications. Number one, like Jeremy already indicated, we applied through TxDOT. We have received our TxDOT permits. You know, initially, here in Stephenville, it's a very important market for us. As you guys well know, y'all live here, and it's a growing market. A lot of commercial activity. There's a lot happening here, and our business owners that we have that advertise with us, billboards are an important part of their advertising mix. You know, in this day and age, technology has definitely dampened a lot of advertising mediums as far as television and radio, and being in more of a rural community like this, adjacent to a metroplex, a lot of times when you're trying to purchase television or radio advertising, you're forced to purchase a lot of markets you don't necessarily want to buy. And so billboard advertising is an opportunity for our local community business owners to reach out to just people in Stephenville. And so it's important market for us, and these could potentially be some good locations for potential business owners here in the Stephenville market. The sizes of the locations, you know, we're looking for guidance on that, and we're willing to work with the city on what we can and have approved. Basically, what we asked TxDOT for was the largest size signs that would be approved typically, which is a 14 by 48, 672 square feet is a standard size that is typical, that TxDOT allows. However, Lamar is willing to reduce the size of those down to either a 10/636 or a 10-foot by 22-foot poster size, which there's some of those that are around town that you've seen already. Lamar Advertising does not build stacks. We don't stack billboards. We don't, and we do not do business with any sexually oriented businesses. And so typically when I approach communities about these things, those are some of the fears that people have right off the bat. And so, you know, our children live in these communities that we do advertising and build billboards. And so we want to represent ourselves the best we can, and you know, definitely never want to be embarrassed by something that's on our billboards. And so I think we operate with a very high ethical standard. And with that, I would like to ask you for approval of these two applications, and I'm open to taking any questions that the board has at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Well, just for the sake of protocol, let's just deal with one sign at a time, one case at a time. So
No problem.
right now, we're discussing the billboard that would be right there on that split right there as we come into town. Yep.
Race course property.
That's your property? All right. Any questions from?
Yeah. On the packet itself, I mean, the picture, the two pictures that were given, I mean, where there's basically looks like a sign facing, I mean, is the sign itself going to be facing directly towards, I mean, that intersection, like that V area right there?
Yes, yeah, so, looking back at the overhead, it basically will be it'd be perpendicular to 281. And so, the signs will pretty much face north and south.
Okay. And I'm not real familiar with what the TxDOT application process is. My main concern with that's, I guess, the exact location is just due to the fact that intersection is, in my opinion, it's probably the worst intersection in town. It's very difficult, especially people from out of town, where they're coming in, they're looking up, they don't know, they go this way, they go that way. It's a very confusing intersection right there.
Mm-hmm.
My concern, the whole point of your business is to get people to look up, and I mean, they're facing right at that sign, I mean, right at that intersection. I would be concerned with the largest sign that y'all have possible being right there. I mean, is that issue addressed at all in the TxDOT application process? Have y'all looked at that issue about, I mean, is there any safety concerns that y'all go through with TxDOT with that intersection right there?
There's not, I think
That's not,
pro-
That's not the right.
can you go back to the?
Yeah, I was gonna say, this photo is
This is-
actually the second location. This is it here.
There you
right
go, right
That's
there.
the view that I'm really.
Yeah,
concerned
to the
about.
right is the R&R barbecue,
Yeah.
and straight
Right.
ahead is the intersection where there's a
Where you have to
Alon
cross-
on the left.
Where you have to actually cross oncoming traffic to merge into where you're going. I mean, it's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's
Location.
I think
it's
there's been,
dicey.
so to address that question of safety, there's been numerous studies done about that question in particular. Do billboards contribute to traffic accidents? And I think there's been, I'm not prepared, I don't have any of those with me now, but I can always provide you with that at a later time. But I think with billboards, our message is so subliminal. I think if you could, each one of you here could probably ask yourselves, you know, did a billboard jump out at you today as you drove around Stephenville? And I think the answer would probably be no. But I'll give you an example. When I was first starting with Lamar in Midland 15 years ago, one of my first advertisers was an attorney. And every customer that came in, he'd ask him, how'd you hear about us? Well, on the list was radio, television, newspaper, Thrifty Nickel, everything. And he didn't, all he did was Univision and billboards. And when I came in for the renewal, he said, you guys are dead last. He's like, you guys rank below radio, and I don't even do radio. And of course, word of mouth was number one, and I think that's always is the way it should be. And so, but when we went out to lunch, the waitress that was waiting on us recognized his picture from the billboard, and the lady that cashed us out recognized the picture from the billboard. And so I think billboards are very subliminal. I don't think they jump out at you in a way that would cause any type of traffic hindrance. I think everyone's primary focus on the road is your first thing. But then I think if you're sitting at a light and you're killing time, and hopefully you're not on your phone or whatever, if you glance over and you see something that says, you know, a bank has 4% interest, it just sticks with you. It's just a 1 or 2 second image that you get in your head. And so we don't, I'm not saying there's a code of ethics about creative, but I mean, we try to do things that are visually pleasing, not jump out at you. And we don't do starbursts, we don't do the things. And so I would say this driving around town, the digital on-premise signs that you have that the businesses own are way more distracting because of the motion that they have, bright lights. And so ours are, I think, very much more benign and part of the, I guess, the scenery than jumping out at you. So study-wise, I think it's been proven that we don't contribute to accidents, but I think it's a fair question to ask. And it's, like you said, of course, because it is a busy intersection, that's why we probably target it, because it has the most traffic, and that's kind of what's good for our business.
What's the normal height? I mean, I know, my understanding, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we're not approving a 14 by 48, we're not approving any of the dimensions or the height. I mean, that's gonna go through the city, is that correct?
Well, I mean, you're approving that, but I mean, their sign, and I probably could've gave you that information, is a 14 by 48 is what they applied for.
Right.
So that's what you are approving that, the dimensions and that, but that was approved by TxDOT. That particular sign is an allowable sign through that, so.
What is the
But
normal?
you said you're willing to work on size. What were the other sizes that you said? I'm sorry, I didn't get it written.
So a very typical size sign for a bulletin, the next size down from this for us would be a 10.6 by 36, so approximately about 400 square feet. And the reason why we say standardized is because the dimensions of a 14 by 48 and the dimensions of a 10.6/36 are equal, so that when we scale the artwork, it's easy to scale. And then the other size sign that we have is what's called a poster. It's 10 feet high by 22 feet wide. We have several of those around Stephenville. And so they are, and that's a size, you know, a poster in Stephenville will be the same as a poster in New York City. It's basically 10 feet, 5 inches high by 22 feet, 9 inches wide. And so that way, advertisers, when they create artwork, they know they can just send a poster size piece of material and it matches up. So that being approximately 220 square feet. And so we're definitely willing to discuss those size options.
And how high off the ground is it normally? I mean, because again, right there, there is like a hanging like caution light and some issues right there. Is it going to be? Obviously, I don't have those measurements about the angle and everything, but how high is it usually off the ground?
So I can typically, so the TxDOT height is 42.5 feet. That's the maximum height. Typically, what we build them is to about 35 feet in height. I know that per se, like in Abilene, the height there on surface streets is 35 feet, and then on primary arteries that are limited access, it's 42.5. So like a loop or an interstate would be 42.5. But so typically, it'd be 35 feet is what we would normally build those to. But you know, we're scheduled to build one in the city of Early that we're going to build at 25 feet. It just fits better with everything that's going on around it. We have a couple, so, again, I mean, height-wise, we're willing to work with that, with the city. I mean, we definitely, don't want anything that is obtrusive, and I think aesthetics is always something that is a concern with billboards. And, you know, of course, looking at this angle, we just need the height to clear the top of the structure. And I don't think these pictures are to scale. I mean, that looks about 100 feet high. I don't,
Yeah.
you know, it is, our technology, we didn't use Photoshop, unfortunately, I don't think. We're just, you know, a couple of guys that, yeah, that's not our specialty, but 35 feet to 42 and a half feet is what we typically do.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the TxDOT, I think the minimum height to start is 15 feet, I believe. And I may be making that up, but I think I
Above
read
road
that.
grade.
Yeah, that's where you gotta start above grade, 15 feet above grade
That's where
to
it's
start.
Okay.
the bottom.
Right.
I believe that's right, Jeremy. That way,
42 is the bottom.
I think one of the things we were concerned about,
15 to 42 feet.
that I'm concerned about, I should say, is the aesthetics as it relates to the square especially. I mean, if you're coming into town from a distance, you see the courthouse from a distance. It's like the highest part, at least on the horizon. This location is elevated too. I mean, I don't know that it's equal, but it seems like there's the Stephenville courthouse, and then a dip, you know, where the Bosque River is, and then it comes back up. Have you done any studies to see if there would be any competition with the view from different angles?
you know, I have not. When I drove this location today, I came up north on 377, basically turned left onto 281 and kind of made that square. So I didn't really proceed down 281 to the northeast very far and come back that way.
Mhm.
That'd be something I definitely could do. I think with the orientation of the sign, with it being more east and west with 281, you know, I guess if you're looking at this view, the overhead, facing back to the west is gonna be your downtown area, but the sign itself has a south face and north face, so the more of the, I guess you would say, any type of visual blockage is gonna be to the north. And so I think up to the north, you know, you have that steel building, that large steel building. You know, I think there's a city park back that way, mostly open space up to the north and also to the south. And so to answer your question, no, I haven't looked at it that way, but I don't feel like where it's located at, especially being so far off to the right of the road as you're coming into town, it's not gonna impede visually the downtown area, so to speak. Because it is pretty far back off that intersection.
No, I understand.
And we could make it a condition where it has to be going the east and west, so it can't be turned.
Yeah. We can talk to the city about that, about,
I mean, if you guys can place it, because this is a special exception, you could place a condition if you choose. I mean, then they, of course, it may not work for them, of course, but, I mean, if that's the exception, the way that you would grant the exception, you could place a condition on it.
And the condition would be, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And I didn't
Well, just-
say what condition, I was just
maybe
saying that.
angling or positioning and height, so that ultimately, I think a concern would be, just like you've mentioned the term aesthetics, you know, just, we don't want to impede growth here, but we also don't want to impede the beauty of that view.
Absolutely.
And I think that would be a consideration, is how obtrusive is the signage or not, right? And so,
And I think I was looking at so for instance, we have a poster back around on 281. I'm trying to think, Greg, where that location is, probably not too back around. But I know the height of the sign is probably not more than 20 feet, I bet. I mean, I think we're probably 10 feet off. Of course, we're in the right of way there, but it's probably 20 feet high. And so, you know, with these posters, like the ones that are 10 feet high by 22 feet wide, I mean, they're designed to kind of just blend in with the surroundings. And so that's, if there is a height restriction, I mean, we can definitely work with that. It just depends on what visual blockage do we have with the buildings? Does it work or not, like you said, to make it viable for us? But we're definitely open to that.
and it would seem that it's set off enough to where if someone is coming from the city and then turning left onto 281, that they would still be able to see all traffic that's coming their way. It's already awful. I mean, we would all agree, it's a tough one. You have to have someone else in the car going, you're clean, it's okay, you know, or not. But Carrie had a question.
Yes, Yes, is this, Jeremy, is this something that Gene Calvert has looked at, or does he look at that too?
He wouldn't look at this, I mean, this wouldn't be, I mean, Gene would look at it like from a traffic standpoint, but not like, is it the site restriction? He wouldn't look at this, so he didn't look at it, I didn't ask him to look at it and think that he would be able to add value to that, so I didn't ask him.
I was thinking traffic. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking if he looked at it.
Would you also be interested in placing the sign there if it was to, if a restriction was to make it face, I guess, east and west? I mean, just basically the opposite way. Is that still I mean, I know it's then off the other main road, but would y'all still be interested in doing that, or would that probably pretty much kill it?
I think that would kill it because it is so far off, because of the, as you're traveling east and west or into town or out of town, I think that would stand so far off. I just don't, and a lot of our impression data that we use to give to advertisers, so a lot of metrics, for instance, like with television or radio, they use Nielsen, and they'll say there's so many shares, like a 12 or something, it's 12% of the households. The impression data that we use measures, one, it measures the traffic count, but then it also measures the size of the sign and how far off the roadway it is. And so, for instance, like this, the way it's situated now to 281, that would be the basis for our impression count. If we oriented it the other way, well, then we're approximately 500 feet off of, 377, and then they would take that into account. And so it drops our impression count way low, so it makes it very difficult for us to market it at that point.
So you want it to be perpendicular to that angle, right? I don't have a pointer, but if
Yeah, you wanted to face it
if you
like
could
that.
go back to the previous,
basically the billboard would be oriented like this.
oh, I see, exactly perpendicular to 281 at that point, as opposed to,
Yeah.
let me just stand here for a second. As
Sure.
opposed to like a right angle there, like perpendicular. In other words, it wouldn't be completely like this, but it would be, like this person here at this intersection would see it straight on.
No, I think we would, well, I guess we would probably take, my idea is that it's probably gonna be more on 281 here. So
Yeah.
not oriented on this bend, but it'd be probably more of this side. Of course, when it's constructed, it's probably gonna be right in this area, so it's really gonna affect both lanes, I would say. To your point, when you're coming around that bend, will it kind of be straight on? Probably so, yes.
It'll kind of have the illusion of straight on,
Yes.
is what you're saying, because
Yes,
it'll be actually at a tiny angle,
yeah.
more perpendicular up the street.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, 281 is what we applied for, and so
I see.
that is where we would want to align it to on that
Okay.
roadway.
Well, it just depends on what part of 281. Like I said, if you're up there at the corner, at the
Mhm.
crook in the road, the fork in the road, then it might be a little bit different.
It does,
Yeah.
anytime you have a bend like that, it's gonna, for a moment, you'll see it straight on as you
Hmm.
bend around.
Okay.
And this kind of depends on what side of the bend, if it's on the inside of the curve, well, then a lot of times it's outside your view. It just,
Mhm. Is it a double-sided sign or just that one side that's facing south?
it'd be north and south, yes, sir. It'd be double-sided,
It'd be
so it'll have a
double-sided.
face on each side. But it will not be a stack. So, I know there's a sign that's probably further up the road that's owned by Arrington. It's got two faces on top of each other.
Mhm.
And so we don't build those structures. We just don't feel like sharing that space with two advertisers is a good business practice. And so again, aesthetically, I don't think it's good for municipalities either, because it's a, 42 and a half, it's 4 billboards instead of 2, and then they're really high and there's a lot. So
Mhm.
we do not, we don't build those structures.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Amanda? All right, any other people from the community or representing this, like perhaps, would you like to introduce yourself? And thank you, Mr. Roberts.
My name is Alois Pisco. I'm the owner of the ALP Music, and I talked with the gentleman because when they approached me, I think will be a great advertisement for them, and kind of good also, maybe good point when people would be locating my business or seeing my business. The only concern I had, I talked to the gentleman, is the size. because when tornado hit Stephenville about 3 years ago, wiped out on Long Street, close to my house, the whole section. And the sign is very close to my property, and 40 feet sign is as wide as my building by 60. That was the only deal we need to work out, the size. And everything else, all the safety is up to you, council. But I definitely, that is my concern, I would like to be safe in my business in case we have really, I know that the sign is going to be done right, they're professional people, but I definitely want to be safe myself for my business, and possibly the people who would follow or get the business eventually after me, I retire, that there will be no conflict of, for some future business, the sign could jeopardize life or the building. That was the only concern of mine. Means personally, what I would prefer to reduce the size, definitely from 40 feet to smaller size.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else signed up to speak to this issue? All right, well, we'll close the public hearing part of this case and discuss amongst the board.
Well, I drove over there and looked, and as far as your issue about blocking downtown view, I don't think that's gonna be an issue for where they wanna put it at, cause that was one of my concerns too,
Mm-hmm.
was the skyline view and looking back not only towards, downtown, but also looking out towards College Farm or Tarleton and all that stuff is.
Mhm.
So I don't think that it's gonna be an issue as far as blocking the view from where I can see.
How far north did you go?
Oh, well, my dad lives up there off County Road 177, so when I was coming back through, I drove straight down 377 coming into town, towards that sign, so I've been facing right at it as I came in, and then I took that loop right there to the right and went down Washington and came down the whole way. So
Okay.
it didn't appear to me as if it would be an issue obstruction-wise. I had the same issue safety-wise on the traffic and, you know, damages if we have storms or something like it, Mr. P-Score said, is that something that this sign is insured to cover the surrounding buildings if your sign falls and all that stuff? Those are my concerns.
It is, part of the lease is that they're indemnified against any damages.
Okay.
And so, our main insurance carrier is AIG,
Okay.
and so we're insured and reinsured, for any acts of God or.
Okay.
And I think it may be, the position of it that close to the building is gonna eliminate some of that. When you get down there, I know what you're talking, when you're trying to merge onto
Yeah.
281, you're gonna be well past that.
Yeah, I didn't.
And I don't
it was
think
gonna
it'll be
issue
blocking.
driving, you know, if it was there, I just kinda imagined it being right there when I was coming, I didn't think it would be too big of an issue traffic-wise, and I think you're already past it, once you're coming off the little loop to merge, it's not gonna be an issue.
What about size? Do you think that,
I think that we should go smaller personally, I think that the 10x48 was maybe a little overkill right there, I know that that's what they want the bigger bang for their buck, but I think for, my opinion would be that smaller would be better in this case.
yeah, 14 by 48 was the initial request, right? And, but we could go as small as 10 by 22. We could stipulate that, I mean, 10 by 22 is the poster size, I think that you mentioned, right? But then there's the middle ground, which is 10.6 by 36, I think. Of course, there are other sizes allowed, I think, by TxDOT, but what would be the pleasure of the board regarding size? Would 10.6 by 36 be
I think that, in
your
my
preference,
opinion-
or
my
the
opinion,
smaller
the
one, 10 by
compromise would be
22?
The middle one, I mean, that would, my opinion, would be the middle size one would be a compromise. That gives them the opportunity, if they decide they wanna just put a poster size in for convenience and selling, they can do that, but if they wanna go with a bigger one, they could, but I would prefer. the
So
10
up
by
to, in other words, we could stipulate that we approve a 10 by 22 up to a 10.6 by 36,
Yeah, just make sure it's in the motion, if that's what you want to
Yeah.
do.
right?
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion, John?
You've got that, you've got height.
Yeah,
I think height's maybe also a more crucial consideration at the moment, because what was the minimum height,
15 was the
was
minimum.
15? Up to 35 or 42 and a half was allowed, I think.
I have to
Well,
do some research on the minimum,
Yeah.
from road grading, and I think they basically, I know in Abilene, the city also stipulates a minimum from road grade. This just so you don't have signs that are basically so low that it can be struck by a vehicle.
Mm.
So that probably sounds right, 15 feet. I mean, a lot of open passes are normally between 14 and 16 feet.
So did y'all do any studies of what the minimum height that y'all could have it and still clear to the building that y'all want to clear?
Did you have
I
one?
did have one, I wanna say the overall height of the building, if I remember correctly, was about 16 foot,
Okay.
17 foot.
Okay,
So if we do, say, 35 foot overall, we come down to 10 foot.
Okay.
Then we got a 2 foot catwalk,
okay,
coming down, so that'd be roughly 12 foot. So 35 minus 12.
23 feet off the ground.
Yeah, so roughly
Okay.
20 foot, so that'd give it a little bit of clearance there as well.
So it'd be about as low as you could go, would be
Yeah.
35.
yeah.
So 35 feet would be maybe the preferred minimum, right? And then, within the motion, we would say, as large as 10 by 22 up to 10.6 by 36, I think, is what I'm understanding the discussion to lead to. It's,
Well, I think the condition in there needs to be that it needs to be, well, they're gonna do it anyway, but, well, never mind. Cause they're not, they said they wouldn't do the, turn it the other way. Cause the turn it
Right.
the other way would be
yeah.
not beneficial to them, but it would look horrible to.
But within your request already, it is a perpendicular to 281 orientation.
Yes, sir.
So we don't really need to adjust that. There's no need, yeah.
And so TxDOT's very particular when
Yeah.
we make an application, for instance, if we put on the application that we're gonna have 2 lights on the board and they come out and they inspect it and there's 3 lights, they'll either fine us $500 or they cancel the permit. It's
Gotcha.
very strict what TxDOT does. So the way it has to be oriented per their application, if we were to switch it, we'd have to totally reapply. But so we have to kind of build it like basically,
Beforehand.
when they go out and inspect it, we mark the edge of the sign where it's gonna be and they go off of that.
And then how long is that permit, life?
1 year.
1 year, okay. And then it's a reapplication process? Okay. But what would happen with us, Jeremy, is if we were to approve of a variance on this, it would be in effect for as long as there's a sign, regardless of how many times there's a reapplication, right? There
Right.
wouldn't have to be a new?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, do I hear a motion from the board?
Yes, I make a motion in case number SC 2018-01, that we approve a special exception under section 12-11 to allow a billboard to be constructed off premises at 112 Morgan Mill Road with the following conditions: that the overall height not exceed 35 feet, the maximum size not exceed 10 foot 6 inches by 36 foot, and it be positioned perpendicular to Highway 281.
Do I hear a second?
Would you say the overall height?
Height.
Overall height
35?
not to exceed 35 feet.
The maximum.
I mean, that's like that's the, is that the bottom of, I mean.
Wasn't that did that sound consistent with what we described just a
That
few?
puts it 23 feet off the ground.
Right,
So
that would have to clear the
35
building.
foot would be over
Yeah.
the very top of the sign, and then so based on 10636, we have what we call a haggle or clearance from road grade of 23 feet.
Yeah.
is what it would be.
And I think that's important to clarify, is TxDOT uses center of the road as their base mark, their benchmark for measurement. So if the road has a little bit up and down on it, go from the center line, so 35 foot from center line.
Right, because there may be a dip in that median that actually is 4 feet, or whatever, and you're saying center line, so,
And we get surveying on all of our structures.
Right.
To make sure we're not overhanging any property lines or anything like that. And I can get whenever we do the survey, we can get this difference from ground level, where the pole's gonna be, to the center line of the road, and make sure that we have a number in mind, and we know from 35 foot overall on that.
do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, well, do we have some discussion? It sounds like there still are some questions, maybe from Brandon or Stephen. Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and vote, call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. All right, this motion passes. Your variance has been granted. All right, so now we have case number SE 2018-002. And Jeremy, if you would introduce that one to us.
Very similar wording. They're requesting a special exception under the 1211 for a billboard to be constructed off premise at 802 East Road, Stephenville, Texas. Same rules apply. They did have to go through TxDOT. They did get a permit granted through TxDOT. This is the location here. Forget the name of the restaurant there, but it's right there on the corner. Castillo's, okay, thank you. Commercial zoning. This is a location, they're gonna be behind, what I consider behind the restaurant,
Mhm.
in this case. So this is a view heading toward what I would call Bruner's or, and then I think this is the other side of it, heading toward the airport, so to speak, so.
That's 377, and that's
It's
281.
going out to-
Yeah.
Yep. And Mr. Roberts, are you representing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you would.
Thank you again. Again, I think with the exceptions that were outlined in the first request would be acceptable to us as well in this location. I think, as a matter of fact, I think the height of this building is probably even lower than Mr. Preskore's peak of his building. And so, again, we're willing to work with whatever the city deems needs to be done here. So, again, very similar situation. We were able to locate this landowner. We think it's in a good area of town, not much, mostly commercial activity around it, very little residential. Again, it's a good leader into some business areas for Stephenville. And so again, we'd like to ask your approval on this motion. And, we are open to the size and height restrictions previously set forth on this location.
So in this illustration, it's even less to scale than the previous, right? It would be a much smaller sign.
Yeah.
This list,
Roof line on here is actually right around 20 foot, it's a little bit higher.
okay, I thought so.
Yeah,
It's a little
Yeah.
I guess the perception of it is even off for me.
It
'cause
feels
looks lower.
flatter, yeah.
So, okay,
But even though the building is a little higher, those same dimensions would work?
I believe so.
The
'cause-
10.6 by 36
Yes, sir.
with a maximum of 35 feet?
Yes, sir.
Be really close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be
You
really
would
close.
clear the building by about 3 feet, is that, what you're saying then?
Yes, sir.
How close to the building is this plan on being, like, right up against the building, basically?
close, yes, sir. There could be some overhang with the catwalk. Either that, or we could look at doing a cantilever or, a structure like that, but as I proposed it, the catwalk could potentially overhang the building so that that pole is out of the way for that restaurant, so trucks can pull through. There's not an issue with height with trucks clearing or anything like that. We do a lot of business with store owners and things of that nature. Everything's always been good, height-wise with that.
Would you do me a favor and actually stand up at the podium and introduce yourself and maybe if we're recording it, then it'll hear your voice.
Yes, sir. I'm Jason Hankins, based out of Abilene as well. I'm actually the real estate manager, so I'm the one that went around, made contact with landowners, and constructed these off-scale images for the size of the boards. But what I was saying was the roof height, I believe, is right at 20-foot overall height. So with the catwalk, with the way we're going to construct it, there could be a little bit overhang with the roof, with the catwalk, but should be a few foot clearance on that. Landowner's aware of it. I took them out back and showed them exactly what I had in mind. Told them that there's maybe a little bit overhang. There's an old satellite dish or something up there that I expressed to the landowner, hey, we may have to remove it. Asked them if they'd use it, and they said, no, go ahead and do whatever you have to do. So they're very open to it. They were aware of this meeting. I spoke with them a little bit earlier. They're supposed to be here, but they're in favor, extremely big time of it, so.
Do-
My concern with, oh, sorry.
Do we, Jeremy, we don't have to have that landowner present, do we?
We don't.
I mean, in the past, we've had,
As long as somebody's here to
represent them?
represent. them.
Okay.
Well, my concern with it being that close to the roof line, overhanging the roof, is and then you have potential for vandalism and people climbing up on the billboards, and you got safety issues in that. So this would be a sign, in my opinion, would have to be higher than the 35 feet to be able to, to be out of that
This one, to me, is, well, we're not in discussion.
No, you can have, I mean, if you have
I
a
don't have a
question.
question.
I just wanted to possibly address that. You know, we have had vandalism on our signs before, just basically graffiti. Typically, maybe in 15 years, we've had 3 instances that I know of in the areas that I've worked at. And it's always been from individuals accessing our column or the ladders that we have in our columns. And so I've never had one actually access one from a roof line, by get on top of a building, but it's definitely possible. I don't know, we would maybe look and see if there's any ladder access that he has to the top of his roof. It happens very infrequently, I'd say that. And, you know, and normally, and the couple of times that we've had it, is boards that are real low to the ground, they just get tagged on the bottom. And I don't know if I've ever had one that's been elevated like this that's actually been vandalized by spray paint, but it is a concern. And normally, we access these signs via bucket truck. And so a lot of the structures that we build now, the ladders only come down probably 10 feet from the top of the structure, from the bottom of the structure. So they'd be, 10 to 15 feet off the ground. So it makes it very difficult, even for them to access it. But I do understand what you're saying, that with it being that close to the roof line, it does make a possibility for that.
What is the height that you currently have in mind that you would put there?
Probably between, 35 feet would work. 42 feet is a possibility, but, the other side of that is cost. And anytime we're adding, 7 feet of column steel, it adds several $1,000s to the cost of the structure. And so sometimes it's better for us if it is something that, we try to build it to a height that, if it doesn't have to be higher, we try not to build it higher. But, if it needs to be higher so there's no roof access, we can go up to 42 and a half per the tech dot. So anywhere in there, we would be okay with.
You mentioned earlier that stacked sign, that's actually probably, it's at the next intersection, I think. Do you know, just so for my visual, do you know how big those, just one of those advertisements is?
I just drove by there today, and I want to say that do you know the size of those faces?
I would guess those to be around 10 by 36 also.
I think so. I think that's about,
10 by 32.
yeah, it might be a
That
smidge.
range, okay.
That's what I was thinking as well, possibly 10 by 32.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
From your expertise, though, if you're not concerned that a 35-foot maximum height sign would be inappropriately accessed by someone from Castillo's roof?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
I think it would be.
It's it would be your signs, right?
Right.
So if anyone would be concerned about vandalism, I would imagine it would be your company, right? And so you're saying that's not really a concern, that vandals do vandal things.
It would be an extraordinary circumstance. I
Okay.
would think if we sat here, in a few years from now, look back on it, I'd be shocked if we have many more signs in Stephenville that are lower to the ground or that are easily accessible, and we've never had a problem with it.
Okay.
Now, after if someone hears this, they might be like, yeah, we'll show you, but no.
Yeah, well, this is one of Mr. Gifford's first meetings, and he's pretty deviant. So, we.
So, no, I think it'd be pretty extraordinary for them to go through that trouble when there is signs that are available. If someone really wanted to tag one of our signs, they could go to one that's just, 10 feet off the
Sure.
ground and access that a lot easier, I think.
All right, thank you very much.
Cool.
My main concern, talking about being able to access the roof, is if it's 3 feet down, you get some not so bright high school kids or something that are hanging out there on the catwalk, and then they fall off, and that's my concern. No offense, I don't really care if your signs are
Gets
tagged or
tagged.
anything.
Right.
Obviously that y'all have that cost built in, and that's part of doing business, but that's more my concern, is that you get some kids up there, or even adults these days do some pretty stupid things. So,
Yeah, that's my
obviously, if
concern.
they're on, if it's gonna be that close to the building, then that was one of the issues. We know it's gonna be pretty close.
Yeah,
I'm
they're
just
doing it on a
concerned
dare.
that it creates a safety hazard for our
So-
citizens. but-
So we should make it more dangerous, probably?
Well,
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the issue, is, if it's 42 feet,
Yeah,
you were saying 42,
42 and a half.
and
Yeah.
so I'm guessing it's gonna be 7 feet higher. Is that still gonna, so now instead of being 3 feet,
It's 10 feet.
it's gonna be 10 feet
Right.
off the ground, which, if they're gonna.
Or
be
off the
down-
roof.
Off the roof,
Right.
that's what I'm talking about, yeah, so, off the roof, it's a little bit higher, harder to get to, but,
And then I guess the other side of that would be, that would lead to possibly in the future, we have to imagine that intersection in the future. That would just also mean a higher obstruction, if you will, too, potentially, right, for that horizon at that place,
Right.
so.
I understand.
I'm just
the-
trying to imagine the whole scenario here.
I would say this, I think that the fears that you have are justified about safety, but I can tell you that in 15 years of working for Lamar, I've never had one instance of anyone climbing on our signs and being injured. And of course, you know, we indemnify our landowners for anything like that happening, but I think if more of the concern is the overall height, if the council sees that, you know, aesthetically, a 35-foot overall would be better than a 42.5-foot overall, you'll see that every single day. And I think that would probably be I'm just saying that's the thing that would probably be the more, if you were gonna go one way or the other, I would say go with the lower height, because I just think that someone accessing our structure, it just so happens infrequently, it really does, but I know it can happen. And, you know, we had talked about a cantilever, so a cantilever is just a torsion bar that basically the column's here, and we put the sign, we move it over basically, so it's not overhanging the roof line. But I don't know if that's necessarily a solution, because if we're moving the column to be out of the way for the landowner, it's still gonna be right up against the building. And so, you know, other than maybe greasing it down with Vaseline or something like that, nobody can jump on our column, that might, but, so I don't know if the cantilever really solves that issue. I just think it's still a criminal offense. And so when we do have these instances, we still report them to the police. And so I think if someone's gonna do something, some kind of wrongdoing like that, they're gonna do it no matter what. And I just think, I know it's a fear, but I think it's a very small percentage of chance of it happening.
One more question, and it has to do with positioning of the sign. Castillo's is a little off kilter in terms of orientation. It's not exactly north-south, I'm
Yes.
pretty sure. So would the signage not line up with Castillo's property, building line, but it would actually be perpendicular to 281 at that place?
That's correct. So that's a great point, because if you're looking at this, it is a little off kilter. And so what we would want to do is our sign would probably be more perpendicular to the roadway again. And so you're gonna probably have an angle like this.
Okay,
And so this back half won't even overhang the building.
Right.
Probably where it's gonna be the closest to could potentially be right up here in the corner. But then back here, you're probably gonna have an opening where it's difficult. But you're right, it will be, orientated towards the road, not
Okay.
towards the building.
thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Roberts? All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll
Thank you.
close the public
Appreciate
hearing and discussion among the board.
Did you ask any other?
Any other?
Any other people from the community want to speak to this request? I didn't see anybody. Okay, thank you. Now we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion among the board? Well, then, do we have a motion? Do I hear a motion? To, the first motion typically would be to approve this request for a special exception. Do I hear a motion to approve this variance?
As far as discussion,
Yeah.
I guess let me discuss fast. I would again have the condition of no larger than 10.6 by 36 as it is. Sorry, I lost my.
Yeah.
I think staying consistent on that, and I think this is even more of a commercial area where, you know, there's so much traffic that comes through that corridor.
Someone would, ultimately, I think, if they're making the motion, it would be that this variance be granted, but with the stipulation that the sign would be no larger than 10.6 by 36 and no higher than 35 feet, to be consistent with that other variation.
I don't know that I would limit it to 35 feet. I mean,
I agree. I think I think in this situation, we might even, taller might be better. It's a double-edged sword in my opinion, because again, from that
Yeah.
viewpoint there, you are, if you're coming from, you know, just going south on 281, where you go there, that sign is gonna block your view of downtown from that side of the road. You know, going north, you're not, or just vice versa, if you're heading north on 281, say you're coming in from 60-70, you turn there and come down, that sign's gonna be all you see when you're coming into Stephenville at 281 right there. It's gonna block everything.
I mean, I personally would probably say not to put a height restriction on this one and let it lay in the hands of Lamar, let them figure out what's best. I mean, ultimately, I mean, coming from my legal standpoint, if they create a condition that's dangerous, I think they're gonna have some liability. Obviously, I don't wanna welcome any kind of dangerous condition to our, you know, in our city and, you know, ask for anybody to get hurt, but I would say I wouldn't leave it at 36, or put the 35 height restriction on. I'd let them make that decision and let them, that's what they do, and let them make that call, taking that into consideration about the ease of access off the Castillo roof line. So I would, personally, I would say that the motion would just limit the overall size to the 10.6 by 36, no larger than 10.6 by 36, but not put any kind of restriction as to the height at this time.
Yep. Well, I was asking for discussion before and then a motion in which we would then discuss that motion. So,
That, at this time, I would move that case number SE-2018-02, requesting a special exception under section 1211 to allow for the billboard to be constructed off premises at 802 East Road, Stephenville, Texas, be approved with the condition that the billboard not exceed the size of 10.6 feet by 36 feet and with no height restrictions at this time.
A second.
Brandon seconds. All right, so now do we have discussion about that motion? Carrie, any thoughts?
Yes, Mr. Roberts, did you say that TxDOT, that the highest it can be is 42.5?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then I think I also heard you say you recommend that shorter be better at the shorter, that the preference would be that we go with less obtrusive than more obtrusive.
One thing I was considering, while we all were discussing, is that this is something I would have to work out the landowner, but if I can move the column far enough away from this building so that it doesn't create an overhang, I'll build it 35 feet overall, which that kind of satisfies everything. And then if the landowner is adamant, you know, if the column is, you know, if they say, hey, I want it right up against my building, that's the only place you can put it, then we'll probably make it a little higher so that we don't have any type of safety issue with someone getting off the structure.
Okay, thank you for that.
So to go with Carrie's point, if I can make it, you put no height restriction on, but they still will have to meet TxDOT's height restriction.
Right.
42.5 feet is gonna be the building height, so.
Yes.
There is a TxDOT height restriction of 42.5.
They
Yeah,
can't,
unless
they
they-
can't be permitted for anything over that. so
Unless
you don't
they
have to
got some
worry
kind of
about that.
variance through them, but yes.
Okay.
May I amend that motion then to say, what Stephen said, but then instead of no height restriction, to say height restriction per TxDOT regulation?
Friendly amendment noted.
It'll need a second.
Do we need a second for a friendly amendment? All right,
Well,
second.
I'll second
Okay,
that.
thank you,
I've never
Mr.
heard of a
Gifford.
friendly amendment, I just know of an amendment.
No,
to
there,
the motion.
it's friendly.
We're all friends.
And then
Yeah.
vote on the amendment.
Yeah,
first.
we'll vote on the amendment then. So do I hear, well, do we need to discuss that amendment further before, we'll just call the question on that amendment to the motion. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign? All right, so now the motion is what Stephen said, but with an amendment regarding the TxDOT regulation of 42.5 being in place. All right, so any further discussion on this motion? All right, I'll call the question then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign? All right, well, it passes then, so congratulations on your two signs.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we don't have any further,
I move to adjourn.
all right. Second, all right.
Quick.
This meeting is adjourned, and I'll make sure and sign the minutes. Thank you.